Welcome to the fourth season of the Faith and Sustainability Podcast, where we look deeper into how our faith traditions inspire us to care for our common home. I'm your host, Leonard Robinson.
And I'm Kat Doyle, your co-host. This podcast is made possible from the generous support of Jamie Lanier, the Varlamov Family Foundation, Georgia Interfaith Power and Light, St. Francis Services, and Semco Atlanta. Okay, who do we have today?
We've got a familiar face with us. We have Natasha Dyer. She currently is with Waste and Resources Action Program. And your title, Senior Behavior Change Specialist, Food and Textiles.
Wait. Natasha, you're going to have to explain that to me because I don't know what that means.
Yeah, sure. So as Leonard mentioned, I now work for an organization that's basically out of the UK, and they've just created their office in the Americas. And my title is food and textile specific because, interestingly, I've worked on food waste for the last decade. But before that, and that's what I was hired to do. But before that, I actually worked in garment manufacturing as a production fashion designer for about 13 or 14 years. And the entire company, so I guess I should back up and talk to you about what Who Wrap is. And they are an organization that's based in 40 countries. They're based out of the UK, but they're now in about 40 countries out of the last 25 years. And they've made it their sole business of being a climate NGO where everything they focus on is on waste and making sure it's more sustainable. How do we figure out how to get into people's daily lives and figure out how we can get them to use less, and how do we get manufacturers to start to design in such a way that they create less waste? But the three sectors that WRAP has always focused on was food waste, plastic waste, and textiles waste. So those are the three product types the organization's focused on for the last 25 years. And like I said, so interesting, I got hired to work on food specifically, but after they got wind that I'd actually spent about 13 years working in textiles as well, I've been able to carve out some of my time to work on textiles, and it's actually been so rewarding because spending so much time working on circular economies as it pertains to like cities and their solid waste management plans means actually I can work in all three of these spaces. So I'm sure before I'm done at WRAP, I'll work in plastics as well too, because it's amazing to have spent the last decade working on how cities can figure out more ways to keep what goes into their landfills more circular, and now to work for an organization that's creating pacts with various countries and various organizations all over the world behind this work. So it's like I'm finally arriving a little bit like we're all these figures.
I might say that you actually are already working in plastics because with food, all the excess plastics that's used in the food industry, and what a lot of people might not realize is that I think more than half of all the nanoplastics that are released into our groundwater come through textiles and washing them. So you're kind of already at that intersection of plastic, textile, and food.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. We applied for something that was a grant with, I don't know if it was the EPA, but it was basically a microplastics grant, and it was going to focus on how we could get people to wash their clothes less. Because of all the nanoplastic. Like, what a campaign, right? Wash less. And I guess, but we didn't get the grant, so I don't know what it was actually. That sounds really funny now, but I don't know what the project would have really entailed. But you're absolutely correct. There's so much plastic because fibers are so synthetic these days. They're not just cottons and wools anymore. They're actually made out of all this plastic. So yeah, it's getting into our water just as fast, and we're all eating a credit card worth of plastic every week.
That's what I hear. That's what I hear.
That's God. And speaking of intersections, well, first, if you remember, Kat, Natasha was our contributor to the Laudato Si Action Plan. She authored the Buy and Share Food Thoughtfully section.
I know. And I think what's cool about this is that as we get an opportunity to really dive deeper into some of those areas of our action plan, speaking with the people who helped us put it together, can you tell us a little bit about why you said yes to helping us with writing the action plan, or at least updating the action plan?
Well, definitely. but like I mentioned a while ago, I had spent about 10 years working on food waste as it pertains to climate. That's really been the basis of it for the city of Atlanta for a number of years. And before that, I actually worked in LA. That's where I cut my teeth, where I did where I did my studies in school, and then actually got into the industry was around food waste. And why I'm so passionate about food is because people don't really realize like how the value in it all, and the fact that how we waste it is actually such a environmental degradator. Never know how to say that, degrader. And I'm very passionate about trying to figure out ways to make people more connected to their food systems and realizing that it has to become more circular. So, I mean, for one thing, the amount of food that we waste in this country, or really universally, it's a universal number, is about 40% of edible food goes to waste, right? And then just if you think of all the water and the energy that's gone into this food, and then the fact that people are hungry. I think 1 in 7 Americans is facing food insecurity every year. And then if you just look at the complete cycle of that, even after you're not eating that food and you're putting that into the waste stream and getting that off to a landfill to decompose in a landfill, it's now creating all this methane that's going into the environment and warming the planet. And so I've always been very connected to wanting to get people to learn more about their food systems, where it comes from, how they should treat food, how they should treat food as life. It is life. So much of our days and how we celebrate with our families is centered around food, and to actually let this life force that the Lord has given us, not treating it with all of the respect that goes into it. It's very very important for me to share that message. And so it was an easy yes to figure out how to make time and to get into this buy and share food thoughtfully space. And I'm very honored to actually be able to talk about food and how sacred it is.
Sounds like we have a commitment to help us with the revision next year of the buy and share food thoughtfully. But you said something. You said the Lord. So this kind of leads me to faith. Let's talk a little bit about your faith walk, and then if you want to share, there's some things that you were able to share of how you got the job, and then how your faith was kind of recharged, renewed. Let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, sure. So a little bit about my faith. I grew up as Jehovah's Witness, actually, and while they trust mostly in God's interventions to save mankind from worldly governments, we are taught as members, we're encouraged to live in harmony with nature and avoid unnecessary environmental damage, because we realize that God gave us a perfect planet to call home, and we are supposed to be living in harmony with all species and biodiversity that inhabit it. And that always stuck with me. So I can remember from an early age always being very concerned with climate, as that's something that came into my reality, I guess. And I can't even remember how far back. That's how long it's been with me. And so even as I did this career shift from garment manufacturing, with that's a long story. The housing market crashed, and all of a sudden people couldn't afford $200 pairs of pants anymore, right? So I was like, what am I going to do with my time next, right? And so food waste found me. That's a long story too, but food waste found me, and I've always been, let me say it like this. I knew when I was losing my job that I wanted to work with preserving the earth, and doing my part to make sure we started to change the systems that we've created as mankind to make the world a better place environmentally. And so somehow food waste exactly found me. I thought I'd work on green buildings and all that, but I found food waste. And so I've worked in this very niche field for a number of years, probably about 7 or 8 years. And then I found a job where I was able to work more on the circular economy and governments and materials as it pertains to circular economy, which was great learning. And then something about that job just fell through. We didn't get a set of funding. So the being able to pay me just kind of fell through. But that's when I really found faith, because I was unemployed for about 8 months, and somehow the Lord provided. I mean, because I definitely believe in the Lord, but I haven't grown up so much where I go to church. I'm not like this church going person. I'm definitely very spiritual. I'm more of a meditator, and I believe in the religion I was raised in. I just haven't stayed close to it, if you will. But I believe in God. I speak with him, I think, in my own way. By meditation and by trying to be a better person, by trying to make sure that I don't harm my neighbor, right? That's the most important thing. And so this was I think one of the first times I really felt carried, because I think I was able to make it. The Lord put in front of me a way to survive. All of a sudden there was a opportunity to work with the federal government and review grants for about 5 or 6 months. It was only supposed to be 3 months. It carried me. And so really what I'm speaking of is that I work in such a niche space that it was hard to find employment for a while. But now he carried me for about 8 months, where just all of a sudden jobs were put right in front of me. There was a way that I was employed for 8 months without really finding the job. And then I found this job, and now it's firing on all pistons, right? It's the fashion, it's the textiles, it's plastics, it's everything that I've been working on for the last 25 years has come full circle. And all I had to do was kind of step out on faith that I would be protected, because it didn't seem like I was supposed to make it for about 8 months, but I did, without even a hitch. And so it made me feel that I was supposed to seek out a new way to worship and to give glory every Sunday. I haven't found that quite yet, but that I'm still searching for this kind of combination of how I should share that I know that I was saved for a number of months.
I love your story, especially because when the Pope wrote the encyclical Laudato Si and the action plan based on that encyclical, he wrote this as a letter to all people of goodwill. And he talked about the fact that all faiths are brought to understand and believe that a creator created this for good. And the fact that you are able to live that and embody that is pretty significant. So as we move into what type of work and what type of things that you wrote about or included in our action plan, talk about what some of those things are. What are some of the things that you've suggested people take a look at about their lives?
This whole Laudato Si is really the Pope saying clearly that to not take care of the environment is a moral issue of some sort, right? And so writing this section in the Laudato Si celebrates how life is sustained through food, and it fosters community and connections. And so when so much of our lives are centered around food, right? Whether that's how we celebrate the various occasions, whether that's Christmas, Easter, birthdays, weddings, funerals, and that brings us all together. And this Pope's call to start to care for the creation through this encyclical, I was sharing with them that if you were to begin to take care of the environment, as is what's called out in this Laudato Si, you then start to realize ways that you need to treat food with much more value, treat it as an asset, right? It's your life source. So that means not wasting. That means potentially finding local sources of food, because food often travels many hundreds of miles to us, like 1,500 miles on a train, on a truck, and that's creating a lot of greenhouse gas emissions. That's exacerbating climate change. And if you learn how to eat seasonally and at the time of the seasons, you'll then start to eat more locally, right? If you realize that food going into landfills creates methane gas that's warming the planet, you will then start to figure out ways not to waste food. You'll eat the leftovers in your fridge. If you can't by any means eat that food, whether it's because maybe it's a avocado peel or it's some form of inedible food, you'll then put it back into the soil so that it can go back into the ground and make new food. You'll realize that there's this cyclical, circular way in that you should treat food as a life source. It's not just something to be discarded, because I always know people are not connected to it. They don't realize all of the time, all of the energy there. So to create food that's wasted every year, we're wasting about 21% of the nation, just the United States outputs in water, 10% of the energy that goes into it. And that's all not taking into account the wonderful, I guess, circle of life that has gone into creating this food. There's a whole value to the food that isn't being taken into account. So what I'm sharing in that section that I wrote is to actually try to connect people to their food and to put value back into it, and for them to see it as an asset and something that should be really handled with care, because I figure so many people are even hungry,
In Catholic social teaching, we also have something called the universal destination of goods, meaning there's enough out there to feed everybody. But our behavior and our need to hoard or keep enough or whatever instead of sharing with one another is also important. That also brings up the whole thing of food and how we think about food and whether we're willing to share food. Does RAP and does the work that you're doing reach out into the communities in terms of sharing food as well?
No, we don't do that as an organization. I do that on the side. Like there's work that I do every 2 weeks with an organization called Second Helpings. I'm not sure if you've heard of them. I also had started this work with an organization called Change to Humanity. And that was all based, I just had this real desire. It's all based on keeping food out of landfill. Third cause of methane emissions in the landfill causes climate change. And so a little bit more background about me. I specifically started working on food waste because I knew the way it decomposes in landfills was creating methane, was creating climate change. And then fast forward 3 or 4 years later, then I figured out we got to feed people, right? And that was all from
Eventually,
a grant that I got. Yeah, right? Because that's what's so funny is because I've worked in recycling now for over a decade, and there's this hierarchy that's called prevention and then reuse for that means feeding people, recovering to feed people. And then after that is recycling or compost. And I worked in compost for so long because it's like this whole way that when you work for solid waste for municipalities, you're just managing waste, right? You're just, so how can we got the food waste. What do? We compost it. You're forgetting to prevent. You're forgetting to feed people. You're forgetting to, and you're just moving to like, we've got it. How do we manage it? And so as I worked for the city of Atlanta, we'd gotten this grant with the Natural Resources Defense Council, where as you're managing food waste, they're not even really going to go into cities. Of course, prevention is number one. That's what they always want you to work on. But if you're not going to figure out how to create programming that deals with the 40% of food that goes to landfill that's actually edible to start to feed some of your food insecure residents, they wouldn't work with you. So that's how I started working on food recovery to feed people after working on compost for like maybe 5 years of my career. It's like, oh no, there's this whole piece of feeding people that we're missing out on.
That interconnectedness. I think that it is probably one of the most interesting things that you've brought to the work that you've done with us. And we want to thank you for being willing to take the time and to really pour yourself into the work that you've done with that. I think that you mentioned that this work was important enough and put it in the Laudato Si action plan that it's a coffee table book and sits in your living room.
That's right. Proudly.
One more thing. What is the website for RAP?
Yeah, it's RAP, like wrap up and close, and then .ngo.
Well, thank you so much, Natasha. Looking forward to working with you again. We stand ready to work hand in hand with RAP and your initiatives and your outreach, because we're not only worshipers, we are also consumers, and there's a lot of us.
That's right.
So everybody, stay connected with us on social media and share your journey with the hashtag Faith and Sustainability.
Don't forget to like and subscribe to our podcast. And Leonard, we'll look forward to meeting you next week
at the intersection of faith and sustainability.
The preceding podcast is a production of the Roman Catholic Archdiocese of Atlanta. Copyright 2025.